Okay, so we're checking out your assignment 9 turn-in. We're looking at the tongue right now. I've just pulled it out from the head so we can look at it a little easier. What you've got over here for your UVs is actually totally acceptable. And in fact, this is probably the way I would lay them out personally. Sometimes laying out UVs is kind of a personal preference thing. You just want to make thoughtful decisions based on where you think seams are least likely to be seen and how you can get the least amount of stretching, okay? So with a layout like this, there's always a trade-off, basically, when you're UV mapping. For this layout, what's happening here is that you've got this really nice, easy shape to paint, okay? It's really recognizable what each space is on the tongue and which polygons are represented here. You can see it, pretty easily. You can just be like, well, this polygon is obviously representative of this one, right? So, makes it easy to paint. However, what's going to happen is anywhere along this edge, okay, or this edge, which is actually the exact same edge, just on different sides of the tongue, alright, you're going to have kind of a discontinuation of this texture that you've been painting or a photograph texture that you've placed on your color map here, okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to have a seam that shows on your model all the way around. Now, when the model is one solid color like this, seams don't really matter because if you're going from the same color of pink to the same color of pink without any change, you're not going to see the seam, you're not going to be aware of it. But as soon as you start putting some more details on this, you're going to see this area here along this edge where the texture on one side is not going to match up perfectly with the texture on the other side. You're going to get this really obvious seam. Now, with something like the tongue, it's tucked inside of the mouth, and it really depends on what kind of shot you're doing. If you're going to zoom in on somebody's mouth, then you should make sure you hide those seams as well as you can. But if it's something that the player's only going to see from far away, or if it's going to be a solid color like this, you don't have to worry about it. So this is totally fine, this is acceptable, and honestly, in this situation, this is how I would do it. But I'm going to talk also about the way it's done in the book as well, so you can also understand that. So what Bruce has done in the book is to actually, instead of having a seam going right around the tongue, like this, okay, which is where ours is right now, he's got a seam going down on the bottom through the center underneath the tongue, alright? So, essentially what that does is, it makes it really unlikely for the player or user, viewer, or whoever is looking at your model, really unlikely to see this break in the texture, this seam down under here when it's placed in a place like that. So, why not do it that way? And the only problem with it is, once we place that seam in an area like this, we have to kind of unwrap these polygons to either side and sort of place them around, just kind of unfold them. If you can picture maybe cutting this with scissors and trying to then unfold this shape outwards around the tongue, that's what that would look like. And what happens in that case is that you're less likely to see the seam, but when you go to paint on a surface like that and then try to put it back together and fold it and sew it back up, you're likely to see some instances of stretching and squashing of your texture. Alright, so basically, the integrity of your polygons here is not going to be as true to the shape of the real polygons on the object. So if I'm, we'll just go ahead and unfold a couple things real quick here and we'll play with that. You don't really have to do this. I mean, you can just watch, follow along with what I'm doing. So I'm just going to grab this edge and I'm going to say, alright, I don't want this seam to go all the way around the tongue anymore. You know, the player's going to be looking at it close up for some reason. So I'm going to put it on the bottom of the tongue where they're not going to be able to see it, alright? So, and it looks like this is actually the top. So this is the bottom right here. Let me grab the right ones. Okay, so I'm going to grab this bottom seam. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my little scissors here to cut that. I'm going to say, okay, that's where my seam's going to be now. And I no longer want this seam all the way around here. So I'm going to sew all of these edges back together and make this my new split, okay? So I've gone ahead and cut that. So these are separate pieces now. I can grab this piece, alright? Just pull it apart. And I'm going to sew it back to the top of the tongue here. So we can just grab an edge and we can see where the corresponding edge is. It'll light up. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to see when you've got, you know, some colors going on in the background here, so we can turn that off with this little, it looks like a little face with blue hair over here. So we can see that this segment lines up or corresponds with these edges on the tongue, alright? And it also corresponds with these as well, alright? So this is just this edge, and the polygons next to them are these top guys right here. And this edge also represents the same edge, and these polygons are the ones that border it on the bottom. Alright, so we're going to put those back together. So I'll just grab this whole piece now that I kind of have an idea of where these things are supposed to go and where they're kind of oriented. You know, you can just kind of imagine this going something like this. Now, obviously because the tongue is swooping over this direction, as soon as we start pulling these verts over to re-sew this seam together, we're going to lose this shape, okay? And we'll go ahead and do that right now to just kind of demonstrate what that's going to look like. I'll start by moving some of these UVs into place to get ready to sew them. And you can see this is changing the shape of these UVs a lot, alright? So we're getting some really stretched out UVs right now. You know, I even folded some over on top of themselves. So, you know, in this case, you'd want to go in and try to keep things as similar to their original shape as you possibly can and size, while also trying to stretch them around the tongue here. So you can see pretty quickly it gets weird when we start stretching things out like this. And so it's not always ideal. And you know, again, this is like a judgment call of do I want to stretch things out? Do I want to stretch out my texture? Or do I want to have seams that are visible or highly visible for the players or viewers, depending on your audience, alright? So, you know, basically we just kind of pulled this around, alright? And kind of stretched it around the outside here. and we'll just sew those together. I'll just grab all these edges. And I'll sew them up. So I get something like this. Alright. Now, you know, I could do the same thing with the other side, but I think you get the idea here. You can just kind of imagine that we've done the other side. And you get this kind of a shape. And this top part is very true to what the tongue shape actually looks like. All these polygons are going to look about the same size, same height, same width as the polygons that they represent. Alright? So, and some of these guys, on the other hand, are shaped pretty differently. So, you know, you look at this, well, let's just grab one. Let's try it out. Let's grab a face. So you can see the rough size and shape of this face, right? And you can see the rough size and shape of the UV set here that represents that face, and they're quite different. So what's going to occur here when you have things that are stretched out or squashed down with their UVs is when you try to paint on that a texture, your texture is actually going to be stretched out or squashed down depending on how big the difference is between the shape of the representation of this face over here and the actual real shape of the face on your model, okay? So again, it's just a judgment call of, you know, what's going to be worse. Is it going to be worse for my player to see a seam in my texture, or is it going to be worse for the texture to be stretched out or squashed down in places? So it's just a judgment call that's up to you. So, you know, again, what you did was just one way of doing it, and it's totally fine. Just make sure that you're thinking about these kinds of things when you're doing your UVs and deciding on a case-by-case basis what is the optimum way for you to lay out your UVs based on your audience, okay? So, I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions about anything that we went over in the video, or anything at all, really. And thanks for watching, and happy modeling!